Yeah, I was noticing that when I was
Senior
driving
class
by,
trip
that
under
this
the
was kind of an interesting.
consent agenda, because I was going to have the kids talk about it.
Call the meeting to the Blackstone Millville Regional School District, February 13th, to order. Please rise for the pledge. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
That's beautiful.
Timing is perfect. Introduction to members.
I'm Steve Tringali from Millville.
I'm the Abominable Soul Man from Blackstone. No, I'm Mike Buckley from Blackstone.
Benny Greenstein, Blackstone.
Erin Vanaco, Millville.
Dr. Perry Davis, Superintendent of Schools.
Bill Chaplin, Blackstone. And Brian Faulkner is now entering. He's trying to hide from the camera, but he will be sitting there in any minute.
It's stuck behind a snowplow.
It's all right.
It's better than not having a snowplow.
That's right. Public forum. We were going to recognize the high school band, but we're going to delay that to the next
Rescheduled
meeting.
to March.
Consent agenda A. We have warrants. Use of school facilities is none. Field trip request, there is one.
Yes, you should have received electronically a request from the high school principal in the senior class to go on a class trip. I called to your attention that this is also an overnight trip, so I did have Mr. Dudek, and I put in front of your places an email he sent me today with the background and the recommendation to ask the committee to support this. Mr. Duchamp will be the lead chaperone. There will be class moderators and several other staff members, as well as perhaps parents accompanying the students, depending on how many go on the senior class trip. But it is out to New York, Pine Grove Ranch in upstate New York, and it will be an overnight trip. But the class will be charging the students for the trip, as well as using, I'm told, some funds from their class treasury.
Mr. Chairman? Yes, go ahead. Well, for this matter, is this on the consent? So it
Yes.
is on the consent, yeah. I just have a couple questions to follow up, Perry, if we could. And, you know, I'm not expecting answers tonight, but once again about, like, the luggage check-in, and, you know, it's one thing to conduct a survey of seniors, we'll say, in an informal fashion, and maybe think that there's going to be a huge turnout. But what's their plan B if it suddenly, you know, only 27 of them are going to go, or something like that, or they find themselves in a situation? So just kind of like, have they thought about that? Just if there's a backup, if
I will speak to Mr. Dudek about that tomorrow morning and tell him to get that information.
But other than that, I mean, I have no problem with provisionally approving it until we get it.
Any other discussion, questions? And the last time they've done an overnight was probably...
According to Mr. Duchamp, this has not been done with senior class trips in probably 8 or 9 years, an actual overnight. This used to be a tradition, but he said after 9/11 that ceased, so it's been a few years since they've done one.
Well, this place is a 4-hour drive, so I think they want
Yeah.
to do it in 2 days rather than one.
Yeah, this is
be a long
I
day.
see the countryside as they go out and come back.
yeah. It's
Went to a place in Connecticut.
Oh, like Frank Davis Resort, or what is, I recall that.
I forget what it was
Yeah,
called.
they've done that, yeah, many times.
Yeah.
Okay, with no other discussion, I'm looking for a motion.
Make a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Motion made by Mr. Buckley, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mrs. Greenstein. Any further discussion? All those in favor, say by saying aye.
Aye.
Nays? Unanimous. Order of the superintendent.
the first item for the report of the superintendent. The committee had asked that I invite Nadine Carter, who is the director of the before and after school extended day program, to come and to speak with you. In your packet, there was some information on the program. I'll ask Nadine to come up to the table and put material together. I think Nadine and I met. Clearly, the financials, the way that we are currently providing services with a before-school extended day at JFK AFM, which combines approximately 6 students from Millville. But in the afternoon, we are currently running 2 programs, 1 in each school. With that projected revenue, this will still result in a deficit at the close of the fiscal year on June 30. So we're very aware of that fact. And, Dean, sorry you're so far away. It just
Is the
That's
room
okay.
bigger, or is it that we afraid of a crowd?
Did you want me to talk about the program a little bit first?
Sure.
Okay. As Dr. Perry said, we closed the program in Millville at the end of October with a savings of nearly $1,000 a month because of that. Currently, the mornings are still opening at 6 a.m. We have up to 22 children in the morning, and plus an additional 5 drop-in. They have the option of drop-in. We have 5 that go on bus 5, Millville bus 5 in the morning, and that's about an 8 o'clock, 8:10 pickup from there. And then we have 3 additional that have that option to drop in from Millville. That there is room for them on the bus. In the program, in the morning program, there are 2 regular staff. They come in at 5:45 to open up the building. And then the third staff comes in at 7 o'clock now. And she's there 3 days a week from 7 to 9, so it's 2 hours each time. And the activities range from gym, free time, games, crafts, and it's more of a drop-in casual program. And then the breakfast is served at 8:30 in the morning. They get served before the rest of the school does. The after-school program is running with 2 sites currently. Blackstone has up to 20 children in the program, plus 2 additional drop-ins. Millville has up to 16 with 2 additional drop-ins in the afternoon. And it goes from the close of school until 6 p.m. We also cover half-days, professional development days. This is a more structured time, group time, homework time, games, free play. Some of the projects they're working on right now is a STEM after-school program sponsored by the Museum of Science. It's a free program, and it's about bubbles and engineering. They're also working on healthy habits, about me, type of enrichment type things, along with art. That's what they're currently doing right now. Questions? Anything so far?
Is the STEM taking place at both places in the afternoon?
Currently, we're piloting it in Millville and adapting it to bring it to the Blackstone site, because it's generally ages for grades 3 to 5, so we're adapting it so we can do both kindergarten to 2 plus 3 to 5, have 2 separate programs going with that.
Could you tell me a little bit more about the Museum of Science program? How'd you get involved with that?
I found it on the website.
On their website? Yeah.
They have a few different programs. They also have some other programs that we're doing with them. They're just like one-time lessons, so you can just pick it up and leave it. The engineering one, that's the one particular one we're doing. It's a long-term project, so once a week they do it on Tuesday. I believe it's Tuesday afternoons, that's when they have the most kids. And so they've been working on that.
Okay. Sounds like an interesting program. Do you know if there's more of those types of programs out there, or something you can
There are.
explore?
The Boston Museum of Science and the Children's Museum from Boston provide all these free lesson plans set for just specifically made for after-school programs.
Oh, good. Good, thanks.
Nadine, is there, I know, Brian, you asked a couple meetings ago, is there a magic number that we would need to hit to break even?
If we can keep both sites open, I would say we'd probably need about 10 to 15 children more. The problem is, we have a option of 1 day to 5 day, so it's no clear set number with that. But if we had about 10 kids, 10 to 15 kids coming 5 days a week,
More.
yes.
But is that with current staffing levels? Or would you have to add staff as well?
That would be adding an additional childcare provider, but their rate is reduced.
Okay.
Nadine, if I just can clarify, that would cover the costs of those programs, but the overhead costs would still be a problem.
Yes.
Remember, there's an overhead cost of Nadine's salary, so
Yeah.
actually, for the entire program to break even, I think the number of participants in the programs, either at Millville or Blackstone, would probably have to approach 60 to 70 children.
Total, not per building.
Just total
yeah,
program.
to cover the staff, because again, incrementally, every time you add children, you have to add a 2 or 3 hour staff person. So incrementally, the program incurs additional expenses, and then Nadine's salary on top of that.
Right.
You know, so.
So 20 or so in Blackstone, 16 or so in Millville, so we're about halfway to where we need to be to more than break even, but, so are there any ideas that you can bring to us to, get us moving in that direction, or is there any support we can provide to you to, get those numbers where we need them to be so we can make this successful?
I found with most parents, if they were, they're concerned because they want to make sure that this is going to be open. First of all, it was whether it was going to be open this year when they were signing them up. And then the second one was whether it was going to be open next year. Because they're looking for the long-term range of it.
Right.
Compared to going with the boys and group, with the competitors in the area. I think parents need assurance. The other area that most parents, if they didn't choose us, was because of snow day coverage. And that was a big concern. We close for snow, but we can't be open for that.
Right.
Although we've been covering in the afternoon, if there's evening activities that have been canceled, we have remained opened,
Right.
which has been a benefit for us.
Can I ask just a question, because I'm unclear on why we can't be open if it's, if the schools are leased, if we lease the schools from the towns? Is there a specific,
I can't guarantee that I would have the custodians in to clear the building.
okay,
Now, Blackstone and Millville are actually plowed by the town, and when I notify them that school is not in session,
Right.
the buildings become less of a priority
okay,
to do that, which means if we wanted to guarantee JFK, FM, and Millville are open, then we would probably have to utilize one of the trucks that we have and a driver to come in and clean it out. And that,
Can I ask you,
that'd be a
is
presenting issue.
there any space at the high school?
Is
What
it-
I'm thinking about in the back of my mind is that I know that one of the new shops, I think, in Tri-County is early childhood development or or child care.
Yeah, that's probably one of their original shops,
Yeah.
actually.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I'm just wondering that, some other districts have done, that type of service within the school where it actually tied, students into it as well. Maybe that's for daycare, maybe, I don't know what that might be, but I'm just wondering if we centralize this in one location. Even if it cost us some type of shuttle to move like a Millville child to up to MES, for school. And it just seems like, if you're trying to do it in two places, there's two overheads and so on and so forth. So is there any thought process there? And knowing that the high school, the first brushback will be that there's probably no space, but knowing that the place was built for like a, you know, much larger student population than the service there now, is there any, is there any good, you know, would that be a strategy? Or I guess the strategy, or what I like to hear is like, okay, how, we knew that there'd be a loss this year, and Dr. Davis has been pretty good about, and everyone's been pretty good about managing that, but how do we forecast forward? Because I mean, if I had a parent, if I had a child in that age group, I would want some guarantee that you'd be there in the fall, or if you're not going to be there. And then project out, like, okay, if it's going to, you know, what's your best guess, or what's your best understanding of, like, when will this be break-even time? Is it going to take 2 more years? Is it going to take 3 more years?
Let me respond to the question of space. Yes, there's space at the high school, but we're currently renting 6 rooms to Bike Up. So that has pretty much taken up any rooms that were not being used to do that. I'd really have to meet with Mr. Duchamp and Mr. Dudak to identify any additional
You
space.
know, I don't even know if there's any curriculum that, or if there's any programs presently in place.
There's
that
no
would
early
support that.
childhood or
You know, I
we
know
do foods and nutrition.
foods and nutrition, or
The .6 teachers.
family consumer science, et cetera.
Right. But, you know, the issue I think you raise is a valid one. The reality is that we have rooms at JFK AFM, and we have access to the cafeterias. And the other thing is we have access to a breakfast program. The breakfast program at the high school, you know, wouldn't be sustainable, because we only do breakfast up there, kind of grab and go.
Yeah.
The breakfast program, we don't do a breakfast program at Millville because we only have very few children, and we do it at the middle school and at the complex. So in order to accommodate the breakfast for the morning, we'd have to stay either where we are now at JFK FM or come here in order to have that breakfast component.
I mean, I hear what Mike's saying in terms of, I mean, you're talking about a direction and a model to get to. Because it would be great to have Milford. When I was in Milford, they had that program downstairs where kids would go and volunteer, or they'd get part-time jobs, and theirs was daycare / preschool, you know, something like that. But, you know, that's kind of, I think we have to develop a model, and that's kind of phase 2 of it. You know what I mean? Phase 1 is how do we get some volume in
I would
at least to the break even.
I'm just concerned with changing it at this point to a centralized location. I think one of the reasons we've been able to attract kids is because, or families to come to us instead of a competitor, is their child's where they need to be for the day, though the Millville ones didn't seem to have an issue transitioning. And I wouldn't want to increase any costs with transportation at this point, just... Are we not, if Millville 5 is picking them up, is there a cost to us associated?
Tellstones
He's making that stop.
would make that stop. They could pick up 20 children at Millville Elementary, bring them to JFK. Now, the downside of that is the children would have to ride the route in Millville.
So it may be a
And then-
deterrent to parent, I mean,
Go.
do you want to put your kid on a bus?
It would be, you know, about a half-hour ride, because remember, Tellstones is on Mendon Street, just up
Yeah.
the street from, so they're basically going by it. But, and that would be no additional cost to us, because like in the morning, the Millville bus
in the
just
river.
swings in, picks them up, does its route, ends up over at Millville Elementary. And they said they could accommodate on one bus, picking up the approximately 20 children, 16 to 20, depending on the day, on one bus. But they would have to, the driver would make her route, and then on the way back
That
to
would be the
the
last.
barn, they would drop them off at the JFK FM building. So there'd be no transportation cost to it.
I mean, do you think we can get to 60 or 70 children, that break-even bar, with the other competitors in town, and with, you know, do you think that's, this is for anybody, do you think that's feasible?
Well, I think it's a growing stage for me. I mean, I hope right now we're looking at the families that we have and making sure we're retaining them for next year. Whether that's by offering some kind of discount. I mean, I guess that would have to come from us, not from Nadine herself, but something to make sure we maintain what we have and then help it grow from there. I don't know.
Well, I think that, this is the first year, and, people who've had their kids into a daycare setting who are in second, third grade and higher, first grade and higher, they're gonna, and they're comfortable where their
They're
children
already
are,
settled
they're not gonna move them. It's a known entity. This is an unknown
We
entity.
have to be
So,
focusing on the younger.
yeah, our biggest opportunity is
newer.
either people who don't like the setting that they're in and want to move their kids somewhere else, or there's a convenience factor. But I think we're going to see it from, in business terms, it's organic growth. It's new customers coming in.
Right.
And actually, these numbers, I think, are not bad for first year, for the size of our communities. I didn't expect us to have 100 kids.
But we also had a really late start. Do you remember when
start.
when was this first presented to?
I was hired June 24th.
So it was August, and the the kids are already tucked away for
Yeah.
September. So I think, we have to kind of ride out the first year, and hopefully next year.
Maybe there's something we can do soon to offer to the kids that are there and, other kids in the school that if you're signed up before the last day of school, there's like a 3-month discount or something.
Well, did anything go out with the kindergarten packets? I know the kindergarten packets went out in February. Did you send anything out with that? Speaking of the new, any notices that we hold because that would be something that would be
Yeah.
beneficial,
Get
is
the
sending
new
it out
ones.
to those
Sure.
new.
Targeted advertising.
Right.
I have had a few inquiries from incoming kindergarten parents about it. They're waiting to have sign-ups for it for next year.
Do we know when our signups are is there a date for them yet?
What typically goes would be April. The beginning of April would be a typical sign-up, March or April.
Maybe when they return the packets? Give it
Yeah,
back
I
in?
mean, I think that's one stream, but I think we have to figure out quickly a marketing blitz between now and April, because if April, people are gonna be locking in somewhere else, April,
Right,
May.
we should be ahead of
And,
game.
and I like some of the ideas that were on here in terms of summer enrichment, and that's, I think that would be a draw. Did you want to go over some of those enrichment programs that was in our
Sure.
packet?
I came up with 2 different types of enrichment. One was for during the school year, would be in the either afternoon or early evenings. And they're very similar in the type of enrichment courses. They're 6 to 8 weeks long, the one that would run the school year. Typically a 60 to 90-minute course, things like yoga, hip-hop dance, art, like the extra enrichment things that aren't offered in the course. With the cost of the course going from like $60 to $80 per student. And all the instructors would be of a professional nature that would be running it. They'd be either certified yoga instructors, certified art instructors, people that have credentials for this. And each course would, with a minimum revenue of $220. The only additional the additional area would be put on to me for registration, overseeing attendance, and if we don't get a minimum of 12 children per class or 12 participants, then we wouldn't run the course. So it would be a guaranteed maker of money.
Now, the kids who currently go, obviously they can go to these classes as well. It's not
Yes.
just
Right.
outside kids.
Right.
Okay. Would they have to pay the additional fee for the course? Because they're already paying to be there for the afternoon anyway.
Right. I had thought about that originally and thought that they could get a discounted rate of that
Okay.
because they're already achieving that. They're already in the program, so.
If I can, to the committee, we need to give some direction to Nadine, because the real issue is, we're gonna run this program and it's gonna be in a deficit this year. You didn't budget for that deficit, so that's gonna have to be absorbed with district funds at the end of your fiscal year by June 30. If we're going to proceed with the program for next year, I think what I heard the committee say is that Nadine needs to go out and market it now to try to generate an increase in the numbers. And again, I'm suggesting that in order to cover all of the expenses, which is for the staffing as well as the overhead of the director's salary, that number is not 50. It's probably closer to 60 or 75 to do that. So I think, if we're going to discuss this for giving parents the direction that we're going to do this next year, then I think Ms. Carter has to go out and market that and move the numbers. They have to move up. The other issue was this issue of consolidating Millville with Blackstone Elementary. I think Aaron raised the point, and I think it's a valid one. Parents would rather have their children stay in the school they're in rather than getting on a bus, doing a 30-minute bus ride, and then, being at another school. I totally agree with that, but we've got to generate the numbers total. I mean, I think this is a total program, so the reality is it's not two programs. If you have the numbers to make the program break even or make money, it doesn't matter. We can maintain two locations. The difficulty is going to be if, in fact, we don't have the numbers to break even, then I think we have to come back in the late spring with a plan that talks about that. Because I don't think I'm hearing from the committee that you want to subsidize this forever.
No.
This is not a required program. I understand trying to build a program, but you can't continue to put something in your budget, run a deficit, and then make it up. I think we just need direction on that. Does that sound reasonable? As a
I
course
think
of it?
at this point, I think we have to have a clear model, and marketing is one of those, but we have to think about summer vacations. We have to think about using volunteers, students within the district that need hours. For summer, if there was something in the elementary schools during summer, during vacations, and really focus on April vacation being a circus, and drawing people in to get people locked in, doing 2 or 3 weeks or 4 weeks over the summer to build on. That's how you're going to increase the numbers. And I think we have to have a clear kind of map on how we're going to do that with you got to have benchmarks. We got to have, we know we got to be up to, 30 or 40, by June,
Well, we need a plan that's gonna show that we're gonna make every effort we can to close the gap, right? And I'm not saying in fiscal 15, but certainly by, we have to be headed in that direction. But along those same lines, it's okay, here's my budget, this is how I'm gonna approach it, these are the things we're gonna do. We're gonna report back to the committee to, do this. And then obviously we have to make a point, and we have to make a decision, but I think we need that plan. Now, granted, this was all kind of rushed and put together quickly and not well planned out on the committee and the district's part. But now is our chance to, let's do this right. What's the best practices? What are other locals? No one wants to get into a competition with some of the fine organizations that are already in place. But what do they do to grab that? How does the education value, offset some of, that desire? I'd much rather, whether it's you're all always in the same building, what have you. And then the other point is, I would look at, okay, what if we did have to transport? What kind of situation, or what could we go to Telstone with and say, what will you charge us if we need to move kids from point A to point B? And what would that be? And that just gets socked into the cost of the program. So I'm with you with that. But I think
If I could make a suggestion, I think we've heard what the committee's interested in. I would suggest that Ms. Carter come back at your first meeting in June with the results of her marketing, what do the numbers look like, and what the plan for this summer would be. And I think that has to be marketed as well. Because again, people are making plans now for childcare coverage for July and August. And you can't send something out the last day of school and expect enrollment. So if we're going to look at summer program, that needs to be developed and marketed, essentially, coming up in March and April, because we got to get signups in May and line it up.
Yeah.
So I have a few
Go ahead,
questions. So are we open February and April vacation?
We offered February vacation, but we had only 8 signups for it, so we closed it. All of those parents did have backup plans in place.
And summer, right now, we are going to have a summer program, or we're not?
Well,
We're-
I haven't heard a
okay.
plan yet.
So so the vacation weeks aren't part of everything we're looking at. Obviously, it's too late for February, it's next week. But maybe for April, we could try to run it as a camp setting with, organized things in a central location for vacation week. Whether it's here or, somewhere that there's room to roam. And I know one thing that I've heard from some parents is the lack of variety, whereas the kids are in the cafeteria, and I know they go outside on a good day, but I think we need to give Nadine more room to work with in the buildings, or more options for the kids to have.
She has access with the principals to every part of the building.
Okay.
Only caveat is other groups that have signed up.
Right, if the
She's not been
space is used.
restricted.
But maybe making it,
Using-
or advertising
Fine.
certain activities.
Mhm.
And someone else just, I think Mike was starting to touch on it with utilizing kids or older kids. National Honor Society, maybe
We
we
have
could set
had
up some
volunteers come in.
tutoring, like, where it's, publicized in that
Yeah,
manner,
the
so.
National Honor Society and Student Council, they have
They
a
need
certain
the
number of hours
hours.
they need to make
Yeah.
up, so this could be
Yeah.
one
I mean,
way.
the other draw that I'm thinking of is to get other towns involved and again, it has to be part of a model, but, during the summer and vacations, if there were true, academic enrichment programs, where focused on literacy or STEM or whatever, that's going to be a draw for other
Right.
area towns.
it-
And once you hook them with one,
Right.
then, other things can
It
happen.
could attract kids that aren't even childcare kids, they just have the interest in that.
Right, I mean, that's what I thought the enrichment was, that's what really drew my
Right.
attention was, that's where you can hook some people. And also, better the district in terms of, if you focus more on literacy or math or STEM or character build, whatever, So I think those are good draws.
You have a full-time executive director. I think she's heard you loud and clear. We need to
Yes.
expand the
Can I
program.
just add one
programs.
more thing, though, before we close out? Is, my concern is we don't want to lose kids who are already in the program either.
Right.
And I think to Aaron's point, that, if there are some criticisms out there, let's make sure that you're hearing them,
Yes.
and you're getting ahead of them, and you're finding out, and maybe doing a survey informally or more formally, to find out what are people looking for, and are we meeting those needs? If they're looking for more diversity, how can we approach that? But the last thing we want to do is try and grow a program on one end, and we're leaking kids out the other. So, and I'm not insinuating that's going to happen, I have no idea.
Right.
But let's just try not to have it
And just to be
happen.
clear, people didn't come to me, it was in general conversations where they were speaking of just the setup of it, or in conversation, it wasn't.
And it's the first year, so
Right.
those are all good things to know from your customers.
I know Milford, when I was a kid, I went every summer they had a community use program in Milford. And it was, you signed up for weeks during the summer, and you had a lot of different activities. And then there was an overnight, everyone slept in the gym, that particular group. And it was high school students that were the counselors, as well as adults and so forth. So there's a lot of growth and potential and opportunity out there if the model's right.
And look how you turned out.
And look at that turned out pretty good.
Thank you,
Okay,
Nadine.
great, thank you, Nadine.
Thanks, Cindy.
The next item on the report is I want to join Dr. Haughey down there at the table to talk to you about the student services budget. I did put in front of you places tonight a copy of the special education budget, which is a line item budget. Dr. Haughey's got a PowerPoint. He's going to walk you through some of the issues. Just by way of background, it's not just special education. Dr. Haughey takes responsibility for our English language learners, and he'll share with you some numbers about that. We also are required under the federal law, under what's called the McKinney-Vento Act, to deal with children that have been identified as homeless, that may locate into our community or actually become homeless and relocate out of Blackstone and Millville. and there's a responsibility that we have as the home district or the receiving district to provide transportation services and coordinate that child's education with their home school. So there are several areas in student services, and we can go through Dr. Haughey's presentation in general. And then I want to speak a little bit about the way we budgeted this year when you look at the line item at the end, just so you understand, because special education is one of those budgets where there's this very substantial federal IDEA grant that we get based on the number of children that are currently being served on IEPs. And several of the staff people, particularly some of the aide salaries, are covered by that grant. And that's, I think it's the first time you see in your budget, when you go through it, where aides are actually identified by name, but then there's a parenthesis to say that they're being funded with federal grant. And then the way in which we apply circuit breaker money. When we look at the out-of-district tuition account and how we've applied $300,000 of circuit breaker money, so you kind of see how that works relative to managing that line item. So let me join Dr. Haughey, and we'll walk you through these slides.
Welcome, Dr. Haughey.
Feel free to stop us at any point.
Do you have to get like a moat pass to get all the way over to that area code over there?
You can move that up too if you want, Paul. Push that table right up there.
I don't want to mess up.
There's a lot of cord there. You got a lot of cord.
I think it's so we
Oh,
can see
so
the
you can see the
Yeah,
monitor.
and honestly, I want to make sure I'm on the right
We
side.
can all move forward.
We could go to them.
Half circle. Do a half circle, circle time.
Yeah.
Yeah, I got a good view of it right here.
Begin.
Thank you very much for having us this evening to talk about the student services budget proposal. One of the key priorities and assumptions in this budget was compliance with federal and state law. We had our coordinated program review at the conclusion of 2011-2012. We had 2 areas of partial implementation in special education that required a corrective action. We completed that at the conclusion of last school year. ELL has been a hanging chad, for lack of a better way of putting it. We've just received our marching orders from not only the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, but OLA, and submitted all our corrective action documentation for how we plan to proceed in addressing the areas that the laws were set one way originally, and now they're changing, and we have to change with it. So we've put forward our plans for that. I'll talk a little bit more about that moving forward in the budget presentation. But I'm very pleased to say that the plan that has been submitted is one that DSE has accepted and recognizes that we have to take hold of in the years ahead, so that when they come back for a full coordinated program review and 4 years from now, we're fully compliant in their eyes in this area as well. And civil rights, we were completely, without a finding, we were completely compliant. We have best practices recognized in a number of areas for civil rights, and that's to the district's credit as well. So compliance is something we've not only committed to meet, but exceed in all aspects of the children that we serve. We have really dedicated our budget in significant amount toward high-quality faculty and staff, so that our commitment to remaining fully compliant, not only in this budget, but in ones in the future, are met. The federal and state mandates are expected to be upheld. These are entitlements. And so by taking something like the grant Dr. Davis had mentioned earlier, that's an entitlement. It's expected that we comply with all the mandates of that grant program for us to receive that money. And again, the faculty and staff are integral to making that happen. Our latest, as I mentioned earlier, the latest coordinated program review and its corrective action. In this slide, it mentions we've received favorable actions and positive feedback, and are continuing to work on it around the area of ELL. In terms of student needs and as it relates to the assumptions and priorities in this presentation, I think there's a few pieces that need to be considered. First is the fact that professional development is needed moving forward, and is something that's going to prove to be important in the years ahead. We have had a number of our faculty and staff kind of change, and particularly at the high school level. Of our 30-plus faculty, 14 just this year are new. That's almost half the faculty and staff. That's a lot. So it's time that we begin retraining in the areas of best practice around inclusive teaching, co-teaching that's effective and meeting the needs of all students in the general ed setting. Refining our curriculum, instruction, and assessment practices so that they're aligned to the Common Core. I believe you've heard this from the principals quite a bit in their discussions. It's an area that is continuing to be refined as we move forward. We've done a good job there, but more work is needed. Defining educational resources and technology infrastructure that supports student learning is also an important aspect to the budget that's been proposed. And, I know at the last meeting, I believe Dr. Davis had mentioned some things around technology and just maintaining or remaining committed to those things that are already in place as being extremely important. Our regional school district's Department of Student Services, this is really a statement from Tom Hare out of Harvard. It talks about minimizing obstacles and maximizing opportunities for every student. Student Services, as it relates to this budget presentation, really is talking about special ed, English language learners, our homeless students in McKinney-Vento who have McKinney-Vento homeless protection in place, and making sure that they are receiving what's needed and necessary. Budget goals. In special ed, it's important to recognize we're not just educating the child from pre-K to grade 12. We also have students age 18 to 22. So from 3 to 5, we're working hard in the areas of transition and making sure they're effectively transitioning into our district. I consider our preschool program a real crown jewel of BMR right now. We've done some excellent things in the area of transitioning and building bridges with Criterion Valley, as well as other early intervention agencies down 146. And I have to say that our 3 to 4-year-olds in integrated preschool, which currently have 22 on individual education programs, is really an exceptional program. Our faculty and staff are key in this area, have really committed themselves to professionally developing and continuing to remain astute to the needs of the students, especially as they're coming to us from early intervention.
Paul, out of the high school number there, 58, how many, is that where the over 18 to 22, that numbers, they're in that number?
There would be 5 students, or a cohort of 5 that are also being serviced in that number.
And they're part of the 22? I'm sorry.
They're part of the...
I said 58.
58,
Sorry.
yes.
Yeah, okay.
Sorry.
So, on that, Paul, is that number, is that at a low, or is that about what we've been servicing? I thought that number was higher earlier.
I'm sorry.
On the life skills,
Yes.
18 to 22.
has that always been about 5, or is that a low? Where does it stand in historical terms?
Historically, it's ebbed and flowed. We've sat at 7, 8. Right now, we're at 5. We have students in grade 8 coming up next year. We're probably going to maintain, I would say, next year 6 or 7 again. Here in this number, or this cohort. I apologize.
Is there any like neighboring districts that could potentially have candidates for that program that we could possibly bring in that would maybe offset some of the cost of that?
Yeah, there are districts that have created programs like this internal to themselves, so we could look at partnering with some. This would be a possibility. However, a lot of districts are starting to build in their infrastructure and capacity internal to them. Milford, I know Milford's been mentioned a few times tonight. Milford does a phenomenal job in their transition programming. There are others down the corridor that are also very well done. We are working in this area to put our students in the best positions possible as they transition over to adult services. I think the work we've done with DDS just this year in working with their outreach coordinator and making those connections has been extremely important. It's something that they went through some changes administratively in terms of who's coordinating that, and right now I really see us doing some nice things and making some excellent inroads with regard to the 18 to 22 transitioning over to adult service. To your question, can we partner? There's no reason we can't investigate that. The thing is, everybody's trying to build it, the same thing, so.
Well, I mean,
trying to have their
maybe there's
capacity.
the singleton or the 1 or 2 in a smaller district or anything like that, that maybe you know, that they're you know, they're looking for a partner. I'm just like the previous guest this evening is like, okay, we have these programs, so are we absolutely, you know, getting our best bang for the dollar? And if we have the program already in place and it was first built for, take, 10 or 12, and we're only servicing 4 or 5, you know, how can we, you know, possibly, you know, make that most effective? So I don't know if there's, you know, if there is any or not, anything like that, but I'd enjoy hearing what you might want to suggest in that area.
Yeah, the Blackstone Valley Educational Collaborative, I mean, the directors, we meet monthly, we talk about that often, and we're always looking for ways to share resources, as you know. And I think that's something that we've done a better job of in the last couple of years in this area, because so many districts are building their capacity, and we will put calls out, hey, does anybody have vision or OT or PT or, you know, some need that maybe isn't high because of a singleton. That said, there's no reason we can't continue to do our outreach.
Okay, thanks.
Could I just follow up on what his thought there and bring it to the other end of the spectrum? You described the integrated preschool as a crown jewel, and I agree with you. That's a great program. I've been aware of that program for the last 15 years, and I think it's phenomenal. Do we have an opportunity to grow that? And likewise, through that, if we have the opportunity and the space to grow it, what is, I think, a best practice? Does that also feed well into our before and after program? You know, could be.
Programmatically, one of the things I really see as important in that instance is holding the faculty and the staff intact. Our human resources are most valuable. Mrs. Colgan, Mrs. Anderson, and Mrs. Dr. Boisford. The 3 teachers are exceptional, and they're really committed. But as a result of their work, we're able to ebb and flow with the needs and adjust the programmatic design. And I think that's not something that you see in a lot of places. That said, it also is incumbent on us to maintain the teaching assistants that are in that program. People that were in other areas of the district now are there, and it's important that we continue to maintain them in the program so that they remain current in what early education and child care are expecting. That's something that has to happen. To me, that's a core element and aspect, and it's probably the one thing that we've worked hard to do by bringing the University of Colorado Denver in, for instance. Sure, thank you. With the University of Colorado Denver, their professional development has been really with them these last 2 years, and now they're starting to think about ways to not only become inclusive in their best practice in what they do, but also the parent outreach component. And that's actually where the year 3, which is what we're in, and year 4, where we plan to go. That's been a part of our conference calls and our exit reports every time University of Colorado Denver has been with us, and that is an important aspect to where we plan to go. I will tell you, this year, I had a chance to watch the tape on Ms. Desai when she presented. One of the things that she mentioned was some of the numbers around the kids. We've maintained approximately 65 to 67 students, that range. We're right now at 65 total enrollment in the preschool. What I find interesting is our payers, as opposed to those on IEPs, is higher. When I arrived here in 2011, we're bringing about $30,000. The last 2 years, we've had $50,000, and right now we're projected to hit $80,000. We're at just about 60% of the overall operation or budget for the year, or halfway through. And of that 80,000, we have 41 and change collected to date. So we're hitting our marks in terms of collections for those that do pay. Again, 22 are on IEPs. It's expected we provide that service, but those typical children, those model children, are here with us in large number.
How many of those, Paul? How many is that, Paul?
Well, again, if we're holding at 65, we're probably
Okay,
at about
so minus
43.
22.
So you do the math. It's about 43. You know,
Gotcha, okay.
payers.
All right,
So, but I really have been impressed with when it was like a lot of 2 and 3 days, and it seems like there's more 5 days involved now, because we're getting more money than we did before. Does that make sense?
I think one of the things the committee needs to understand, children that are identified as needing services at age 3 and 4 are children that are more moderately disabled and require more intensive services in the areas of speech and language, occupational therapy, physical therapy, sometimes assistive technology, and support with a ratio of teaching assistants to deal with that. So this population for Blackstone Millville has remained somewhat consistent, but I think it also is part of a bigger trend that Dr. Haughey will talk about in a moment, about the fact that, given that our overall population is going down, this population of children with more moderate to severe disabilities is remaining steady and actually growing slightly. So, and I think the questions that were asked by the committee, certainly, the collaboratives that we belong to, Dr. Haughey talks about the programs that we have and are available, but I can tell you from the superintendents at those meetings, everybody's experiencing an increase in this population. So the reality is, more and more school districts are finding that they're creating these programs because they are serving a larger population of students, regardless of the size of the community, to do it. And the other variable in sending a child to a program, it's the transportation. For a child to come from a neighboring community, our program is very cost appropriate, but then you're picking up anywhere from $8,000 to $10,000 in transportation. So that's the variable that.
But we're only responsible for the transportation for children on plans.
On plans, correct, right.
So, but
right.
regular ed.
But to attract a
you get
child
the,
from another community, they would pay us the tuition for the program, but then they would incur an additional $8,000 in transportation. Those two numbers together is the reason that most districts do it themselves. It's just becoming the cost-benefit analysis. It's better to run your own program to do it, simply because when you add the transportation costs in. But certainly, I think, Dr. Haughey's been doing, the spreading of the word, through the BICO Collaborative and the Blackstone Valley Collaborative that were there. But I know in conversations that I've had with the respective superintendent groups, people are sharing this population is growing for them as well. And that's just a phenomenon that we're experiencing. And I think it's generally accepted across the state that this population has remained somewhat stable and is growing slightly statewide.
And to that point, just to kind of dovetail in, if I may, PT, OT, speech, all the itinerant services that we do provide, I consider them some of the best providers in the region. And they're professional, they go the extra mile, they're there at the beginning, they're there at the end, they're there at night. I mean, these are people who not only live in the towns or the neighboring town next to us, but they're extremely committed to the kids and have done dynamite work. We're really starting to, in our meetings as a department, when we sit down and talk about itinerant services, we're starting to create a roadmap now about where are we now, where do we want to be in 3 years, and where do we want to be in 5. And that isn't a conversation for me, it's for them, because I want them to start thinking long-term about what the structure and the organization can look like, and where is it appropriate to have a child to be most included in line with their needs. And then when we really truly have a child with high need who is needing to be removed from the general curriculum and get that itinerant service in a separate setting, what's that need to look like too? And being strategic in our thinking. And that's something that's coming with them and from them, and it's been good dialogue. This is the first budget process, because of the shift we've made, where there's been a lot of thought about not just right here, right now, but what are we thinking about for next year and the year after? And again, I credit them rolling that up with me. It's not all one person or any one person driving. It's all of us as a team working together. So, to your question around the early intervention and the preschool component, they're doing great work. I mean, they really are.
Can you just talk, I know you had a list of growing programs right there. I know with autism, for example, that's a really growing. Do you see a need for additional programs to handle those type of kids?
We're really, I think, again, it comes down to the professional development and where we go with PD in this disability category, number one. Number two, making sure that we get the programs that are research-based and tied in to best practice for them, so that when they're going through professional development, it makes sense. A lot of social pragmatics in this area is something that is clearly needed. We have, for instance, school psychologists and other special educators working in a number of different types of curriculum and getting them to kind of identify the one that fits the need at the elementary level to our kids right now has been
But to your
paramount.
point, in the budget, there's an additional teacher
Yeah.
in the special education budget for Millville Elementary. As students on the autism spectrum move out of our preschool and kindergarten, we will be adding a teacher to accommodate that cohort of children. And that, ultimately, the goal is to try to move children on the spectrum to a more inclusive setting, but it's been determined by the staff that this cohort of children, and again, it's a 5 or 6 student cohort, we are going to hire an additional teacher at Millville Elementary to do that. With the exiting 5th grade, it's a swap. So the net for Millville is no new staff, but the reality is we are hiring a teacher at this point, special education, that's in the budget. So there is an additional special ed teacher to service students, essentially moving on, to the K-1 program.
And that will service both towns?
Yes. Actually, the cohort of children is approximately
I know Mrs.
3
Desai
children
had
from each
told
town.
us that you were going to speak of something additional in Millville, so
Yep.
I'm assuming that's,
That is it. Because of the needs of the children, there are about 5 children that clearly, through the team process, have been identified, and they clearly need something different or in line with
we are
their...
creating a program for them.
We're extending the program that
Correct.
currently is meeting their needs, but they're aging up, and therefore we need to add
Okay.
the next level, which
So the
requires
program's
an
moving
additional
with them.
teacher.
We're very clear on what it is they need. The team has good data. They've done their due diligence. Now it's about just making sure we have the right human resource or human capital component
But even
there
though it's
for
being
them.
housed in Millville, if there's anyone in the district, that's
Yep.
where they'll.
They would go there.
That's where they, okay.
Correct.
Again, as in the preschool is housed at Millville, but it is a Blackstone, it's a regional program, and the population that Paul talked about of 22 children are actually split between both communities, because all of our preschool is operationalized out of Millville Elementary.
So in terms of programs, it's clearly put up on the slide, the autism spectrum at the elementary, social, emotional, and/or behavioral supports at the middle school, and then the transition program that we spoke about for the 18 to 22s at the high school are all programs that we are working on and working toward for our kids. In terms of challenges, it's a continuing challenge to maintain our students in the least restrictive environment. Professional development, as I've mentioned, to retrain the current special ed teachers and staff is clearly needed because of the changing needs of the students, but also because we have had some turnover in our faculty and our staff at different spots in the district. Special ed this year at JFK AFM, we went through some changes there, and also at the high school, as I mentioned. So the last piece is English language learners. Support programs to keep them as students in the general education classes is paramount. The mandates aren't going down, they're increasing. So this is definitely going to be a focus for us moving forward. We have really worked hard to meet the needs of these children over the last couple of years. Unfortunately, the population has exploded. I mean, it's increased
Do we
significantly.
have any numbers around that?
I do. It's in the
Last
slide
slide.
set as well.
Last slide.
Yes, sir. We've gone, quickly, in just a quick snap, we've gone from September 1st, we were at or around 20, 21. We reported on October 1 SIMS about 27. And at last snapshot, literally just with access testing, which has just been concluded, it's like the MCAS for ELL students. We just finished access and we tested 35 children. So we've gone up quite a bit. That's that, and I would have expected us to be there 2 years from now, maybe a year and a half. It's a transient population and they're moving here, and so we have them and we need to.
What about the teacher certification? Isn't there a component of that that's, I guess everyone will have to respond to?
Yes, as a matter of fact, I just attended the training yesterday for retail. Retail is, we're part of cohort 3, which is the low incidence districts. Paul Aguilar, the executive director of OLA, which is a language acquisition division of DESE, was presenting, and we are expected to have approximately 47 faculty next year trained for these 35 children. They have the list off based on what's in Sims, and they know the people who've been teaching these children, what ones have had them predominantly. Believe it or not, it's been JFK and AFM with the largest numbers right now. Right now, they're holding 22 of those children in that one building. Millville has one student who's preschool, and the remainder at the middle school and high school. And they're not large numbers at those two levels, but again, you still have to program for them. The cohort that is quite large at this time is at AFM JFK, but that is in the back slide as well. But there is a component to licensure, and it's not just for the teachers. If you plan on being an administrator who wants to do observations in the years ahead, for you to have the ability to observe and do so with your license, you need to get this training as an administrator as well. So that's something else that's noteworthy, which had a lot of people sitting up. It wasn't just teachers or coordinators, it was administrators as well.
Okay.
That are going to need this in the next 2 years for cohort 3. Moving on. Out-of-district tuition placement and treatment and/or tuition payments. As Dr. Davis had mentioned, students with disabilities who the team determines really have needs beyond our capacity are educated in collaboratives and/or private 766 approved programs in schools outside the district. This is one of the budget drivers that is something that is closely monitored by the director and the Department of Student Services in collaboration with the superintendent. It's something we talk about quite often.
Annette, now you say you have 20 out of district, right?
Correct.
Okay. Historically, high, low, in between, average?
Believe it or not, I looked at that. It's funny you just asked that. I just did a look back.
I'm like that. I'm a psychic.
Since 2011, July of 2011 when I arrived, we were averaging around 25, 24, 26. We went to 24 at the close of the year. We'd had it down to about 19, and then it went up to 24. We're right now at 20. There may be a student, as a result of our work with an outside agency, that may need to be placed, but we captured that in the projection for the budgeting purposes because of our communication right now. We are projecting at this time 20 because that's what's there and that's what's known, but we're holding serve at 20. I was happy. I think last year during this exact time, I was kind of happy. We finally had gotten to like 17, 18, and getting into meeting, and I was like, we were having kids in district. They were in their programs in district, and I was really happy about that. And then a whole bunch of shifts occurred, and that does happen. Special ed is very fluid. So right now we are at 20, and that is the number that we reported on our October 1 SIMS. It's the one that's just been reported in our counts as well. And hopefully there'll be no more curveballs and sliders coming before the end of the year and/or public hearing or town meeting.
So we're going to forecast the 20 and hope that we don't have any change.
Yeah.
Or
Well, I don't want to say hope.
What would happen? I'm looking at both of you. Okay. So now September 1 rolls around, and
The strategy is that we're budgeting based on what we know. We're holding back some of the circuit breaker money as a way to have a reserve if we get a move-in, all right? Or we have a student in district after we set the budget. So I'm not spending all of the circuit breaker money as we build the budget at this point. We'll have about 365 in circuit breaker. We're allocating 300,000 towards this budget. That leaves us 65,000, which quite frankly gives us that little piece in order to anticipate a move-in or a student in our district that the team determines has to be out of district. And I just want to clarify, out of district could be a day or a residential placement. I mean, some of these are children that are actually attending residential programs, but there are also children that may be attending a BICO program, a collaborative program for low-incident population. So but they're not being educated primarily in the Blackstone Millville Regional School District in-house programs to do that.
thank you.
To kind of carry forward, as soon as something like that occurs, it's incumbent on me to get with Dr. Davis and sit with him and kind of walk through the fact pattern and where we go and what we do. It's also important, that we track the students in their IEPs and making sure that all signatures are collected, we're tracking the expense, and that circuit breaker is something that, we're watching the expense as it relates to circuit breaker and foundation, as an example, so that if there's any reimbursement to be recovered, we have that student captured as well. So I hope.
Because, you can't predict the future, and, and then there have even been situations in the past where, things have happened during the year that caused, changes in children's plans. So that's good.
If you remember this time last year, we'd projected about $300,000 in what we were expecting on what the percentage was going to be for a circuit breaker reimbursement. I projected a 60% reimbursement. It came in at 75. So when we were sitting here this time last year, my target was 300 and change, and I said it would be important for us to kind of have our arms around how we utilize that moving forward, that we were thoughtful. And that's how I'd left. This year, we've kind of worked very well, and Dr. Davis has shown me and said, Paul, this is what you've got, this is what we're doing, this is what needs to happen. The communication has been very good, and it's incumbent on me to kind of get back to him when a change does happen with a plan or a program, to your point. In terms of other drivers to the budget, not only placement treatment, but transportation is important. The average transportation is approximately $25,000 to $30,000. We really work hard to partner with neighboring communities to split that cost whenever possible. If they're going the same direction, we try to split the route with a neighboring district so that we can split the cost. But that is approximately in this budget, I believe, about $540-something thousand, $545,000. And that is a significant amount of money. I don't care how you cut it. We're always looking for ways to do things different and better. As we move forward in our discussions about transportation, it's always looking at ways we can do things different and better and hopefully reduce that expense. Contract services. Contract services has been something that in 2011 was approximately $225,000 to $250,000. At this time, it's sitting at about $125,000 to $135,000, I believe. The large expenses are outside assessments, neuropsychological, that are needed. Behavioral consultants to work with our children, and particularly those who are not necessarily here but require the service at an outside placement. Transition programs, orientation and mobility, this is for the visually impaired, as well as hearing assistance and or work with the deaf community and Commission of Deaf and Hard of Hearing. So hearing aids and hearing assistance are aspects to the contract services. I really appreciated Dr. Davis and I sitting down and kind of breaking that out and even spelling it out in some of the detail that you have in this budget. And I don't know that that's ever happened in the last couple of years for me. And so you can even see, like, when we say hearing services, this is exactly what we're talking about with Milford Radiology as an example. When we talk about orientation mobility, Bi-County has an orientation mobility contract service they provide us. So it's clearly defined in the budget this time for you. There's no curveballs or sliders or where's that coming from. It's also based on a trend that we've seen over the last 2 years.
So you reduced that by 100,000.
Yeah, because what we've done is we've hired our BCBA in. We don't need that service out as much as we once did. And as a result, that board-certified behavioralist is doing incredible work internal to us in our operation and with the children.
100K is the net, because you added that person.
Yeah.
So that's
Right.
good.
That's the savings on the other side, correct.
Good.
The last slide talks about, I apologize, my bottom slide got cut on this here, I apologize, ladies and gentlemen. Supplies and materials, again, that's been captured. Originally, this time last year, we had I'd come forward requesting $30,000 for supplies and materials. What we tried to do in this budget is break it down and put it into the buildings so it's easily tracked and we know exactly what's needed and where it's needed. Each building has a specific allocation, and if you go in, you can see that number. It's still approximately $30,000 again, but it's broken out to AFM, JFK, middle school, high school, and that also will help us for end-of-year reporting. Quite simply, end-of-year report is very tedious time-consuming, and it's important if we can break it down at the start, that we have our data there, and it's easier to get into the hands of the state.
In Paul, your summer program, I remember last year, going into the summer, that's fully funded this year. It's going, what does that generally run? In terms of, and just briefly, like numbers, staffing, it's all summer, is it 8 weeks?
Yeah, it's a 6-week program. There's a 4-week component and a 6-week component. The programs of the students who are with need that is significant tend to go into the 6-week program. Those who have more academic type needs would go in the 4-week component or aspect of the program. We're always looking for ways to align to the program need specific, the I and the IEP. But the design has been 4 weeks and 6 weeks. And so moving forward this year, it's a sincere hope to keep that paradigm intact, but do it in a way where we're really drilled down and have a clear
Trend-wise,
picture of who's
how
there.
many kids, how many students, just so the public
Approximately
knows?
75.
Okay, that's a lot of
75
kids. That's
students.
a lot of kids.
Yeah, yeah. There'll be 75 total projected. It was originally, in 2011, about 82. Right now, we're projecting about 75. Last year, it was 80 to 75. This year's about 75. So we've had some shifts and some movement. That's a fact. But, the anticipation is 75 to be here come July 7th or thereabout.
And those are direct service costs, transportation costs, okay.
It's all built
Okay,
in this
good.
time, yes.
Just so the
we're
public
not
knows
counting
that it's a 12-month program.
We're really not counting. It's extended school year with the main proviso being we're trying to prevent the regression, a substantial regression in maintaining knowledge and skill of the young person, to be quite honest. And the last, and that's really what you see on the last bullet there. It's not, I'm sorry, it's not showing up on the slides so well, but that piece about summer school, it really is about maintaining knowledge and skill and preventing substantial regression for the young people on IEPs. Lastly, last slide, budget drivers. Compliance with ELLs, as we mentioned, 35 students at this time, 24 at the elementary level total, 7 at middle and 4 at high school. We could have another one moving in at any moment, which, believe it or not, I get emails all the time. I can't believe it, but it does happen. After the training yesterday, as I mentioned, professional development for our cohort, which is cohort 3 or low incidence, we are projected to participate next year as well as the year after. So if a teacher, general ed as well as special ed, has an ELL in their class, they are expected to get this endorsement of Sheltered English Immersion and have the retail training. They are expected to participate in this program. DESE, as of yesterday, identified 47. That roster was shared. I almost fell out of my chair because I didn't think we had that many that we're servicing, but they are. And there was a cohort 1 district in the room that had over 775 teachers to train and hadn't even started, and they're already 2 years in cohort 1. So there's a lot of work to do in this area.
What's that, is the training year-long, or does that have to be done by September?
Well, they're going to roll it out. Over the summer, they're going to start the registration process for our teachers. I thought that was interesting. Most of the teachers are gone, and they're starting it in the summer, so I said that's a little problematic, but that's how they designed it. They'll be able to take fall through, it'll be approximately an October 1 start through end of January, and then another session starting in February through the end of May. That's the understanding I have.
And it's a hybrid.
There's a few different variations and 4 different paths to, you're right, it is a hybrid. But there's a number of different paths to take. So if we've had category 1, 2, or 4 trainers, or people that have been trained in those categories historically, our faculty don't have to go through the full program. However, if you use the short path, I made a special little star and note, and I'll even say it now on TV for everyone's benefit. If you take the short track, or what they call the short track program, it automatically triggers an audit. They're going to look at you closely as to why you took 15 hours instead of the 45. So it's kind of one of those things they're really trying to push everyone, administration, faculty, staff, toward the long track and get the full 45 hours of training so that they understand.
So why offer the short track?
Principally because there are some people that trained under the old model.
Right.
And, you know, some people even have graduate degrees in bilingual education or English language transition. So you legitimately can do it. The reason I think the department is saying they're going to audit is that they will not accept on face value that this person really has that skill. You're going to have to be able to supply more documentation to it. But
Okay,
it-
all right. So it's
particularly
not
in-
somebody coming out and checking out your, you know, your
Well,
records and everything
you know,
else.
you would have to submit more documentation. And obviously, this is much more of an issue in districts that have been working with a bilingual population for decades. And so, but remember, this was the result of a federal suit for the failure of the Commonwealth to implement this English language learner program. Principally, one of the citations in there was the adequacy of the trained staff. So therefore, it's a compliance issue for DESE. You can't accept it on face value. I can't, as a superintendent, just look at a form, check it off, and move on. So I understand why they're doing it.
Yeah.
But obviously, if you had a staff member that had significant academic background in that area, you could demonstrate that the person has these knowledge and skills. But for most teachers, that's not the case. Mr. Buckley raised this question earlier. This actually is moving so that people, when they recertify, not this year, but in the future, are actually going to have the retail as part of their professional development program to do it. I will tell you that one of the difficulties that was experienced last summer in districts that were trained is the department was getting this information out late as to where the trainings were offered. So people were finding out they had 6 slots in Lowell, and they were from Webster. And you had to find teachers that were willing to drive to Lowell to take the training. So hopefully this year, the coordination will be a little bit more centralized, and we won't be given late notice. They've identified the number of teachers, and principally teachers that are going to be having these children in their classes. So it's not a matter of asking for volunteers. In some cases, it's actually going to the physics teacher at the high school and say, you will have children with ELL issues in your building, and therefore, you need to get trained. All right? It's easier at the elementary level because you have multiple teachers at a grade level, and you can say to Mrs. Smith, you know, you will be our designated third grade teacher. It's a low incident population, and the others on the team don't necessarily have to be trained. But eventually, the model is all teachers will receive this training as a matter of recertification. But Paul was, as he said, he went to Holyoke, went to the session, and trying to get the information out to our faculty early enough so that they are not caught, you know, with late notice in June where the training sessions are going to be. That was really problematic last summer.
There are, if I may, there are some creature comforts we can try and build in for the 47 personnel that are going to be impacted, and we may have more or less depending on. This was a real kind of slider to me, a curveball that I saw as they were talking. You have an ELL in your course, therefore you're training in retail, and then that ELL student leaves that class or leaves the district. That person's supposed to unenroll. I said, what? So they've already started a program and have to come out. And yet, the reverse also could happen. If a young person shows up, ELL second language learner from Egypt, happens to show up in that class. Now that person needs to get on that roster and get in these trainings. That's the reason for the break between the fall and the spring cohorts being designed. They're looking for sites. Operationally, we need to talk, to be honest, about maybe we could host. We have a few really good trainers in and around us. There are some other districts that are in the same boat right next to us. I do not want to hear any more stories from friends of mine in neighboring towns who drove to Arlington and they shut the heat off because, hey, it's 4 o'clock and the class is starting at 3:30. And at 4 they shut the heat off and they're freezing at 6. These are real things that happened. There are certain things I think we could do for our faculty and our staff in partnership with another district so that we can kind of hit the marks and needs of our community and maybe another next to us. And because the trainers are local, I think we might have an opportunity here with that. as well. But operationally, that's something I had on the docket for us to talk about after yesterday. So PD is a big component moving forward for our faculty and our staff for ELL. We are a WIDA state, so it is expected that we maintain the national standards for WIDA. And finally, I would say McKinney-Vento and homes.
stands for?
World-class instructional design and assessment. I had to go back and think about that.
Thank God for that.
Caught me quick there.
Nice, though. Good comeback.
McKinney-Vento, homeless transportation. This is an area historically, I believe it's been with Mr. Monroe and a few others, tracking this data and this information in our reporting. This year, it's with Student Services. Believe it or not, I've done it in another life. I got retrained in September, October. It was a very informative retrain that the state was putting on. And as a result, we are currently with 3 students who require McKinney-Vento protection, homeless transportation services. And they are going to communities from here to Boston, Worcester, Norfolk.
Can you
So-
just describe the process?
The process is under the federal law, Race to the Top, Title I. The federal government was very aware of the fact that children that are mostly in poverty tend to become homeless. And therefore, one of the issues was making sure that that child's education continued. So the federal government passed, as part of that reauthorization, what is referred to as McKinney-Vento, which means that if a child becomes homeless, the district that they are in must, provide transportation for them. Now, in large states, we have county school systems, so most of it happens within the county. In a state like Massachusetts, it starts becoming crossing city and town borders. So, for example, a student that became homeless in Boston found temporary housing in Blackstone, but they meet the criteria of being homeless, and therefore, the city of Boston and the Blackstone Millville School District are splitting the costs of transporting that child to and from his school in the Boston Public Schools on a daily basis. So the concept is fine.
Well, could I just ask you that?
The dilemma is, in a state like Massachusetts where you don't have a countywide
So
school system.
this, we'll say this individual
Yeah.
lived in Blackstone,
No,
never
lived in Boston.
Boston. Lived in
Became-
Boston,
Became homeless in Boston
okay.
and is now living in what is considered a temporary housing situation.
Correct.
Which meets the criteria of being
Where
homeless.
does he, where
In
does he
Blackstone.
domicile?
In Blackstone.
Here in our four walls, or our 4
So I'm gonna
borders
ask
of
the
either
obvious
Blackstone or
We-
Millville.
and we transfer him back to Boston.
To go to the
Yeah.
school, that's the whole point.
Right.
So
Stay
why
in your
why
school.
isn't the regulation that, I mean, yeah, we understand that the child needs to be educated, but why wouldn't that child be educated? Why wouldn't they transfer to
Because
the district that they're
The
in?
definition of homeless is they're in transition, that where they're living now is not permanent. If it
Correct.
becomes permanent, they're no longer homeless.
Well, what determines permanence?
A formal lease that they're actually in a property,
Okay,
not in a temporary living situation.
okay. So they're in essence staying with someone or
Correct.
some,
Staying with a family
Okay.
member or sleeping on someone's couch or
Could
something
be,
like that.
could be that issue, or could be living in a temporary facility funded by, a state agency.
and this isn't a new regulation. This is something that's existed. We're just experiencing it
Correct, for
now.
the first time.
Okay.
Now, I should tell you that the Commonwealth, 2 years ago, when this was implemented, the school committees and the School Committee Association and the superintendents claimed that this was an unfunded mandate, and the auditor determined that it was unfunded. So there's actually a reimbursement for this program. So although we're paying the money now, we will probably get back maybe 50% of our costs with paperwork that we will have to file. But the
Is
legislature...
that right along with the 100% regional reimbursement?
Regional reimbursement is no longer in the law, so...
No, I mean regional transportation.
Oh, regional
reimbursement.
transportation, yes.
Yeah, 71D evaporated, I guess.
It's the last clause in the law, subject to annual appropriation. So, but the reality is, this is, I believe, the first time that we've ever experienced actual homeless situations. And, as I said, Paul, we have one from Boston, one from Worcester, and one from community Norfolk.
So do we have an idea of what that that situation's costing us?
We
Without-
do track that.
Yeah.
We do track that through our office, yes.
Okay.
I did not bring that number
No,
with me
that's
today.
okay, just as long as we know
The
what it
Boston
is.
one is the most expensive,
It is.
several hundred.
And is it factored into, it's factored in here? Are we factoring into the budget, or how we?
At this point, I have not factored in, because I don't have any past data to base it on.
Yeah.
And we're gonna look at the reimbursement, but yes, more than likely, I will be putting in the transportation line item a sum of money for that.
In conversation, if I may, there has not been a large number of students that have hit our four walls and needed long-distance transportation.
But yes,
But it's similar to
So-
alternate placement, where
Right.
you don't know.
It-
Until it
Correct.
happens, you don't know, so
Total-
is it something we need to look at
it's a totally
for
unanticipated
future budgets to
expense.
say,
That's
this is a potential risk we need to
Right.
factor?
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
And what I would say is, our office, our department is really working hard to pay attention to all three young people. Talk to Boston often about where are they in this process of getting the young person back to their family or a family member back in the city. Things like that all the time, as well as track the finance aspect, because we are gonna try and make that request for reimbursement. Whether it's available or not is another matter, but that's what we're expected to do in the department. And Mr. Sario and I talk about that piece and making sure all that information is kept safe.
The fundamental principle is that children that find themselves in a homeless situation, the goal is to get them permanent housing, at which point they are no longer homeless.
Yeah.
So in some cases, due to family-related issues, which a social service agency like DCF might be involved in the family, or another agency is involved with the family, and the goal is to get them reunified, back in the community of origin. So this is very much a transient population, but yes, we are spending money this year, and we will have to
It
tack.
can't be easy for those kids
No.
to make that
If you
commute every
imagine-
day.
Having to get up and get a vehicle in Blackstone and drive all the way into Boston. It's, okay. So those are the budget drivers. Do you have any questions?
Any other questions for Paul in terms of this area?
I've got a few.
Sure.
We can take a look at the budget. Let me just, if I may, Mr. Chairman. If we look at instructional classroom teachers, 2305, which looks like it's up 181,000. Are there additional positions in that?
Page, if you give me,
Page 6, halfway, about right in the middle of the page.
classroom teachers,
Yeah, it's up 181,707. I'm just wondering, is there an increase in head count there, or is that just, maybe you just explain it?
one of the things that was not in the budget last year was the summer program.
Right.
At 27,000, but also, this would show the teacher we're hiring at Millville. It's coming out of the regular ed, but it's coming into this budget.
So it's a +1 in the head count. I'm just interested in head count, to understand that.
In
Yeah,
answer to
we'll
that
probably
question,
subtract
yes.
it out of the other one, okay.
Correct.
Correct.
Okay, that's the,
Go ahead.
I have a couple more.
And
Go ahead, Evan.
Based on the line item Mike's looking at,
I'm sorry?
based on the line item that Mike is looking at?
Yes.
Are we going back to 4 full-time team chairs?
We've added at the high school a .6 FTE of a teacher, and that Dr. Haughey talked about. We have students coming up from the middle school that need a language-based program. So we're not looking at, we have currently 3.4.
We have 3 team chairs, 1.4 out-of-district coordinator currently.
Yeah.
In the proposal, the .4 would go to a full FTE and be a teaching position in keeping with the contract language for the out-of-district coordinator.
She would do two things:
Correct.
coordinate out-of-district placements, those 20 students, and also be a
A
.6
classroom teacher?
.6 teacher. Now, I just want to share, it may not be, as we reorganize the high school faculty, it may not all center around that individual, but the way it's budgeted at this point, it's a .6 FTE at the high school, yes.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Mike.
Jumping to page 16. top section there, functional, instructional assistance, 2330, is up 126,000. Now, I'd almost have to guess that the 166 was too low, just on a, looking at fiscal 13's being 215 as the actual, but that's still about an $80,000 delta from the actual in 13 to the 15 proposal. So is that increases, or what's going on there?
Go ahead. So, one of the things with sequestration that had been considered and was on our radar last year in our discussion was the fact that through first brush, we were looking at a 10% reduction in federal funds, the Unity grant in
Right.
particular. So we're trying to capture into the budget process that monies to sustain the FTE count and maintain and remain committed to the faculty and staff we have. Much as we talked about in the
And
presentation.
we believe that the population still supports this number. See, that's my problem, is that, lots of times we get, and this is not a criticism to you or to anyone, but it's like, okay, that person, it's like Topsy. We keep growing this thing. And, that's a big chunk of change for an increase when we're probably gonna be faced with some significant cuts
Yes.
to get this thing to black.
We've actually reduced from where we were from 2011 to now. So we're not looking to add anything in this area. We're looking
But can
to,
you tell me, is that 126, is that new people, or is that,
No.
Perry, maybe you can give me an FTE count via email, just
Sure.
copy everybody
If
on
you-
instructional assistance.
Yeah, all the names of the people are listed there. I'm sorry, I don't know, I can meet with Paul and go over that. But we've listed, I think, for the first
Yeah, I
time,
think so.
who the actual bodies are. And if you notice, the persons, this is what I meant before, somebody will be listed, and then in parentheses, it says federal grant. So that you're seeing, we are paying a lot more than what you see in the budget, because a substantial number are coming out of the federal grant. The only thing I'll tell you also, I met with Dr. Haughey the other day, the Council for Exceptional Children had the authorization and for IDEA that was just announced, and the Commonwealth is getting a 4.6% increase. We were projecting a 10% decrease.
Okay.
We don't know what that means for reallocation until the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, Marty Nicknack, the Director of the State Office of Special Education, gets those numbers. But 10% now is no longer realistic, so I think we're going to be able to roll some of this out back to the federal grant
Okay.
to do that.
That's what I was gonna also ask, is that, I know it's all in line here like that, but what is the, and this is a number you'll probably have to get me, or I can add it all up,
Yep.
is that what is the total grant pulling out of here?
Yep.
And I do like this approach. However, a question that will be asked downtown
Right.
will be, is that truly that number? So we have to also explain that whatever the special ed budget is,
Correct.
there's like a X amount of dollars that's in there that's, coming out of either circuit breaker or IDEA, so that they really get a true view of what, the
cost
I think, Mr. Buckley, there'll be a back page,
A back page? Are we going to two back pages?
probably, to explain grants and
Good idea.
so that we're clear on what the costs
Oh,
are.
this will be
because
part of our Thursday morning get-togethers when it
That
doesn't
was
snow.
one of my conversations that I'm planning to have with you next week.
Okay.
It's simply to call to your attention, because when you look at the operating budget, sometimes you don't get the true picture of what we're actually spending in special ed, if in fact you don't look at what we're paying people out of federal grants, or what we're using circuit breaker money to offset. But I hear the question, and I'll meet with Dr. Haughey and do an FTE count. We did add this year one additional special education aide at the JFK.
Correct.
We added a special ed teacher last year. We thought the population was going to be probably 2 to 3, and it didn't justify an aide. By about October, the population was up to 5 to 6, and we did this year add an aide to that program. But I understand the question, and we'll work on it.
I do have those numbers.
Yep.
I'd rather not guess.
Yeah,
We started at,
you can
it was
just
in the
give
third,
the
low
committee the
30s,
numbers.
and
then
we
the
added
other-
one.
My last question,
Easy
Mr.
fix.
Chairman, is that, the transportation is up 144K over last year, so that's a concern. Now, I know that the Commonwealth lets you kind of just reallocate those bids, but do we go out for bid every year for some of this?
As a matter of fact, I had dinner with a friend of mine last night, and that exact question came up. With the vendors that have set routes and have had these children for some time, and they've done good work and have partnerships with neighboring communities where we can cut the bill in half, we don't like to tinker with those, and we try to maintain the contract from the year prior. Anything new, we do put to bid, and we get 3 bids every time. Lowest bid gets the business.
Now, I know it's allowed in the procurement, but I'm just wondering, would, by actually going to the street, could that maybe force them to sharpen their pencils? I'm just wondering, because, that may be fine for several years, but I think we kind of get, maybe in bad habits and the oversight. I know the Commonwealth will let you do that, but, if they maybe have the fear that they're going to lose out to, say, some upstart or something like that, that maybe that helps just us get a little bit better of a deal. Because this type of thing is, with all due respect, is that no one learns anything on the bus, well, other than to swear and probably swing. But those are things you probably don't want them doing.
The Bi-County Collaborative is looking at transportation. That is an area that they are working on. That has been discussed not only on the operational committee, but the executive level. It is something that is in the works. Unfortunately, our area does not have a collaborative that really works in this area, so we are dependent upon the vendors in our surrounding areas.
So when you say in the collaborative, like the Blackstone Valley Collaborative doesn't?
BVEC does not have a transportation component, so what we do is, by county is our collaborative that we would reach to, and they are working up different scenarios around transportation. In other collaborative areas, like Accept in the Metro West, they have a transportation division that they automatically can work together to find the way to become most cost-effective.
Right.
So this is something that is in the works with Bi-County Collaborative. It is in its infancy stages, but it has been researched and is going through the process.
Did you bring that up when you talked to the Valley guys, that, because they must be all in the same boat. It's only,
I co-chaired one of my last things as a non-retired superintendent was a state task force on special education transportation, and we identified in that evaluation that the most cost-effective way to do transportation was in fact to do it through collaboratives. And the Accept Collaborative is one of 3 state models to that. And there was grant money 3 or 4 years ago to try to get communities to buy into it, to deal with it. One of the issues is you really do have to have people all putting their hands up and saying, I'll go into this,
right.
Because the collaborative would have to at least accept, they rent the vehicles, they hire the drivers, they pay the overhead, they pay the benefits, and, charge per mile, to do it. In some cases, people say, well, I could get the guy down the street to do it for $50 less. The problem is that you might call the guy down the street and he may say, oh, I'm not doing that anymore. At least with a collaborative, they will be there for you and provide the service and deal with it. So I hear the issue, and I will, again, follow up with Dr. Haughey and see if FICO is willing to do it. But the other part of the transportation for us is that we have in-district transportation, much of that handled through Telstone, which we're very comfortable with in terms of as equipment, as drivers, and the in-district transportation. We also have in this budget the vehicle that was purchased by the district and the driver to handle our in-district transportation, particularly with programs at the high school,
right.
To reduce our cost to do it. But
that's an interesting distinction. If I
we
could,
need to look at that.
the in-district was not something the department tracked. So in other words, in 2011 and even last year, the Department of Student Services watched out-of-district. So it was incumbent on me to work with neighboring districts to find, for the out-of-district kiddos, splits and ways we could share transport, as an example. And we've, as directors, have worked very well together in the Valley to do that. However, this year, in-district transport has, in the budget, moved into our department because it was not there before. And that was something that Dr. Davis caught and we fixed. But had it not been for his efforts, we wouldn't have known that it was being put on another side of the ledger, because it was all with Telstone, it was all under one invoice, it was all on one side. We've tried to break it out so we know it's a 2 on the end-of-year report for special ed, as opposed to a 1, which is general ed. And that's important, because for end-of-year reporting, that kind of drives some of our funding.
So
Yeah.
I'm going to be honest, the big increase here, part of it is the fact that I drove out of the regular transportation, the in-district sped that was provided by Telstone.
Okay.
So
So
let me.
that's now on this year's
Yes.
projected.
Yes.
Yes.
And that had not happened before.
Which is
And
where it
it's
should be.
not any
I
one person.
caught that when I was doing the end-of-the-year report, because I kept saying, where's my sped in district? And when Donna researched the bills, it was all buried in the monthly
It was just
Telstone
lumped
bill.
together for Telstra.
Well, because that was the way it was been
Yeah.
done.
Yeah.
And it is reimbursable.
But this increase is not as big as it looks.
Correct. So I can proof that number out. I'll have Donna proof that number out.
And I think we're headed into year 3 of a 3 with Telstone, I think.
I believe. I know we're not out for bid this year.
No, and that's, I want
And
to
then we have a-
reiterate that, is that in the past, we'd always done 3 with an option for 2.
Correct.
The former superintendent chose not to do that. Don't know why, but that has always been a great way, for us to be able to forecast, knowing you'd have a bump, but you knew 3 years ahead of time what the bump was. So,
I can only speak to the special ed in district. In what I've seen this year, they've been phenomenal to us.
they always have been.
They've been phenomenal to us, and there's never questions, comments, queries, concerns before, during, or after. I can call anytime, day or night, they've been there. Never, and even when we can't answer it, we research it, we work at it together.
I believe Mr. Telstone is celebrating his 50th year of service to the Blackstone and Noble schools. Not a bad run.
That's great. Anything else for Dr. Haughey? Thank you.
Thanks
So we'll follow up and get
Very
answers to
good.
those
Thank you.
questions. Fine.
Thank you. Thank you.
It's okay, you're not the quorum.
What you want to do?
So now we're going to move to Chapter 70 state aid?
I'd actually ask that we defer this because we got snowed out. I met with Mr. Buckley once, and we were going to meet with Donna today to kind of refine and look at that, and he's going to come in next week. So if we can defer that to our meeting in end of February.
Okay.
All right. I did have in the packet, and you should have gotten it, a kind of summary of the budget that you were asking about, FTEs in the presentation on the SPED. So I've kind of summarized them there on a cover memo. I do want to share some good news. Donna Scungio and I have been working with our insurance consultant, Ken Lombardi from EBS Foreign, who helps manage principally our health insurance account, which we purchased through the collaborative Maya. And I was saying, I'm doing the budget, I need the number. The range of increase that he was telling me prior to today was anywhere from a 5 to 9%, but we were auditing our actual expenses to see whether or not our rate was going to be below that. Because 2 weeks ago, the districts that were getting high increases got their notice, and we should have gotten one. And I called and said, we didn't get our notice. We were supposed to get that at the end of January, and it's now February. Where is it? And he said, well, that's probably good news. So I pressed him on the phone beginning of this week, and he and I had a conversation. The good news is our rates for Blue Cross Blue Shield our program rates are not going to increase. I just want to be clear. Our program rates, that doesn't mean individual policies might tweak a little bit, but the overall, for the district's perspective, the program rates are not going to increase. So one of the things that Donna Scungio will do next week is go through our numbers and get back to Mr. Lombardi, but we should see some savings in our health insurance account as a result of that. And the reason that's based on usage. We're rated based on our use, and we had a good year in terms of our usage, and therefore we're getting the benefit of that through the purchasing of the health insurance Blue Cross Blue Shield through Maya. So we should be able to make a reduction.
It's good news.
It's very
Good
good
news.
news. It's very good news.
And early besides, that's even better.
Yeah.
Yes, in terms of that. The other thing is, I just want to call to your attention, we have the budget hearing scheduled for March 12th, and we need to take out the public notices. The tradition has been to place a legal ad in the Woonsocket Call and the Milford paper to cover us, and also to serve notice through the constables in the towns. And that is at the high school. That's been the tradition.
Right.
To have a meeting at the high school. So
Well,
we
whatever.
will, Bridget Walsh has prepared the material. Pat Robertson was helpful, with that information. So we will be publicizing our public hearing on the budget, all right, which is not your final approval of the budget, and we'll be pulling all of that together. We do have a meeting, another meeting at the end of February, on the 27th, I think, to try to take some more action on the overall budget. So if you do have any questions on the budget, please email me so that I can get that information, and as we're making changes, I'll do a summary and present the total budget. The budget summary, is done by function line items, and I'm told that that's essentially what we follow when we do the budget hearing, but we will have the detailed budget as well out there. All right. Any questions on that? Like that good news. The next item is approval of the calendar. At our last meeting, you had questions about the November date. I went back to the principals, and indeed, the November half-day on the calendar does relate to conferences. It has more of an impact on the high school, but there are conferences at the elementary as well. So the principals assured me that half-day in November is in response to the conference requirement at all of the schools. The other one, I think it was Mr.
was me,
Stingali asked about the third professional development day, whether or not that date of January 20th would make sense, given the high school's end of first semester exams. And indeed, Mr. Dudak went back, so we are recommending that we move that to the Friday before Martin Luther King Day. It'll kind of be a study weekend for those students who will be starting their exams, and then we do not disrupt the exam schedule and end up kicking it into the last week in January to do that. So.
Are we going to market that as a study weekend?
It's fine.
As the superintendent of
We'll be
schools, I
chaperones.
always market things as an academic learning experience. Study weekend,
4 full days of study.
okay? So I do need the committee to vote to approve this calendar so that we can then publicize it on our website and give notice to parents. And that what the principals are doing is they then backfill their part of the calendar with all of the various activities at the different schools. And that's something that will be made available probably in another month.
Make a motion to accept the school calendar.
Motion made by Ms. Robin, is there a second?
Second?
Second by Mr. Conjali, any further discussion?
Can
Hearing-
you just
Oh, I
reiterate?
was gonna do hearing none, go ahead.
The two PD days for September 3rd and 4th
Yes.
are all, they're going to be literacy.
Well, at the elementary level, they're going to be heavily literacy-based, and some of the specials we'll be working on, to provide additional professional development for like art, music, phys ed. At the middle school level, Mr. Cameron will be working on curriculum development. There will be some transition for some of the sixth grade reading teachers to work on the literacy program during those 2 days, but there will be professional development here at the middle school. The high school focus will be principally on getting ready for NEAS for those 2 days. And Mr. Dudak and his committee will be structuring those days and dealing with that. So, one of the things with Karen McGuire, who's now working 2 days a week, will be to outline a plan for professional development, so that'll become part of the transition package for the new leadership team to do that. But the principals, now know that, and as soon as you vote, we can, finalize our planning on that.
Okay,
Thank you.
good. All right, all those in favor, so we say an aye?
Aye.
Nays? Unanimous?
The next item is the Unit B contract. This is before you. We reached agreement with Unit B. The contract, I believe, I put in front of your places tonight, but because you do formally have to vote it in open session, and then we have a couple of copies to pass around for people to sign. So, Could I have a motion?
Motion to accept the Unit B contract.
Motion by Mrs. Robin,
I'll second that.
second by Mr. Tringali. Any discussion? All in favor, so I say an aye.
Aye.
Nays? Abstentions? Unanimous.
I have a folder with 2 copies. I had told Monique Samard she didn't need to come out tonight, so I'm kind of playing secretary at the same time.
Do you want us to sign both?
Yes.
Okay.
I'll start them over here. Thank you. The other item that I have under the report of the superintendent is we have a meeting, or meetings, I'm not sure, but we think one meeting next week in Millville with the Finance Committee to talk about the roof project and the
Wednesday.
draft budget.
It's the 19th. It's for the Finance Committee and also the public hearing for,
So the 19th.
is it the 19th? Is that what you have?
Yeah, I have the following one, the town meeting on the
The
24th.
special town meeting is the 25th, but
24th.
their finance meeting is, I have it.
19th at 7 o'clock.
19th, so it'll be
It's
the
the
19th.
19th.
That sounds about
Yeah,
right.
if it's, FinCom is
FinCom.
Wednesdays.
FinCom will be on Wednesday, and then they are going to be talking about, and have the public hearing for the special town meeting at that point.
So I will be preparing, material on the roof project. We did hear from MSBA, and they wanted a clarification from the OPM on the, what's called the, financial plan, but there's 3 initials. I'm drawing a blank on the PFA, the Project Financial Agreement. It was off by $7. Not a problem, but,
We can pass Brian's hat around and get
No.
that $7.
not a problem.
Be able to get that.
It's less than what we had put in the warrant article, so it's not a problem to do that. So the 19th I will be there, and I'm assuming,
I'll be there too.
I'll be there. Steve? Okay. I will
Millions.
get you something.
Okay.
All right.
Is there any, can I just ask a quick question?
Yes.
Is there anything you were going to follow up within your leadership team in terms of the open houses on the first 2 Saturdays of March?
I had that
Elementary.
on my agenda, and I canceled my
Okay.
meeting for Tuesday, so I have to be honest.
Okay.
I did speak with Jesse, and he's been in touch with the high school tech teacher, and we're trying to get some students to help with that.
Mm-hmm.
But the first idea when I brought it up, principals were interested in being there.
Good.
But
Okay.
I will
All right.
need to follow
We can
up.
work out that logistics.
And all of you got my email, Mr. Cameron and his wife had a baby girl.
That's great news.
I didn't get that.
You didn't?
I didn't get that.
I
No.
didn't get that.
Okay, I sent it out, and I thought I sent it to all of you.
Did you guys get it?
No,
No.
I just heard it when I
So
came
let's hear
for the
it. So,
breakfast.
that baby girl?
Baby girl?
Yeah, 7
Yeah.
pounds.
Alice?
Alice Elizabeth or Elizabeth Alice?
I think it's Alice Elizabeth.
Alice Elizabeth, yes.
Okay.
Mom and
Oh,
Dad are doing
congratulations.
fine. He will be out. I did order him not to call in front of his assistant principal. She is not to call him, and he is not to call here. That if there are issues, we will email him, and he will deal with them when he can. So he will be out.
He's returning after vacation, is that?
The plan was to be back after vacation. But again, I told him to please let me know if everything's fine. But they're very excited. And his life is forever changed.
Yes, it is.
More than he knew.
For the better.
Is this the first child? Their first
Sorry?
child?
Yes, first child.
Oh, congratulations, son, even more so.
And when was this?
This is last week.
Last week,
Last week.
yes.
Did not know that.
Yes, and I'll have to find out where I sent that email.
I thought the title was the whole committee.
I did too. Sometimes when I do the BFM, BMRSC, Bill's name pops up, and I just assume it goes to everybody, but obviously it didn't. So I apologize for that.
Okay.
Yeah, change that, will you, so it doesn't screw them up.
I have nothing to do with that. All right, so you good?
I am good. I did put in front of your places a fairly thick packet, I think, on the draft model language on district-determined measures, DDMs. We will need to have some discussion at some point in executive session on the impact of DDMs with the teachers.
Isn't that the designation for a dentist?
I'm sorry?
Yeah, I think it is.
DDS,
What?
DDS.
DDS.
Dentist designation.
Oh,
That's okay.
DDS, yeah. These are DDMs. Right.
So we can move on.
We can move on.
Okay, great. Subcommittee reports, superintendent search.
Exciting news.
Yeah, we worked with a great group of people, volunteers, and put in more hours than I ever thought it would be. Not that I added them up, but I think it was more than 18 in a little bit of time. So, and as of now, NESDEC's in the process of completing reference checks, and more information will be coming forward soon. We would like to schedule a meeting, if possible, after vacation, so we can finish the follow-up on that,
An additional meeting besides the 27th, or?
if possible.
Okay.
But, or do you want to wait till the 27th?
Um,
NESDEC didn't really tell us how much time they need, but
Is the plan to do, not announce and interview candidates that night?
Just to announce, not to interview candidates.
Yeah, I mean,
So you could do that by,
A quick meeting.
do you need to do it at a meeting?
the real question, I guess, is, I'm assuming that Dr. Pettencourt's contacting and people are acknowledging whether they want to be moved forward,
Yes.
and then that information is then released.
I think
Publicly?
the committee as a whole needs to determine
Yeah.
how they want to proceed
Okay.
once,
Yeah.
once those candidates are moved forward.
Yeah, my only question, quite frankly, is the timing.
Mhm.
If there's candidates in that mix that are also candidating other places, you may want to consider a short meeting next week,
this.
just so that that commitment is done.
I would like to see it next week, but I didn't know if that was
So-
possible.
I would just advise
Throw it
the
out
committee that if you wait a week, you might lose a candidate.
How many are we looking at? Is it,
We won't know until
Okay.
the reference checks are done.
so do you want to meet next week is what I'm, I guess where we're at?
I think, and Monday's a holiday, so we can't even,
What
even
about
if it's
next Thursday?
posted tomorrow,
Next Thursday.
We'd have to post tomorrow for
for any time.
for
next
Thursday.
week.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So if everyone can make it, then
Yeah, that's
Next
fine.
Thursday, good for people?
Yeah.
I can't, but you don't need me. All right, but I
We
will,
need you, but not that night.
Okay, you can have the day off.
But I would like to thank the people that served on the screening committee. We had a very diverse group. It really allowed some conversation, different viewpoints. That was very, I think, made the process go a whole lot better. And so hopefully you will be encouraged by the group that can move forward.
Great.
So what time Thursday?
at 6:30, is that convenient?
6:30?
Here?
Yes, yeah. Anybody else, not 6:30, I know.
Do I need to get in touch with Dr. Bettencourt, or he does not need to be at that meeting? Would he-
Is it our meeting, or
I'll
is
shoot
he
him an
with us?
email.
Okay, fine.
Is he here? Is he going to be with us?
Is he gonna be part of
I
that?
think so,
I
Or-
think he
Okay.
comes forward at
I
that
think so.
point.
Because then we need to decide how we're moving forward as a committee, so they're directing us in that,
Good,
so
okay.
I do believe he'll be
Because there's a
here.
variety of processes
Yeah,
that we
good,
can follow.
okay.
You'll pop him an email?
Yes.
I just didn't know what his availability was next week.
Yes. Can we had a meeting scheduled for Friday that we will not need.
This Friday?
Did you?
Yeah, I emailed Bridget.
Oh, good.
I
Okay.
haven't heard back.
Well, yeah,
Mich-
we'll take care of unposting it.
We
I
don't-
did email her this morning, or this afternoon.
Yeah. She was in part of the day.
It was a very long evening last night, but we got it done. and-
Actually, it was today.
I
Today.
heard,
It was
It's
this
spilled
morning.
into today?
It did.
Holy moly.
I heard. I had to authorize overtime.
I didn't realize he stayed.
Are you giving these guys overtime? What do you got? They got different rate? What's the deal?
Custodians.
I'm kidding. Okay.
He didn't leave. I realized that when we were leaving. I don't know if we should have told them to go.
We didn't realize it. I left my pocketbook here. I had to walk all the way around the building and come back in. I get to my car and I have my keys, but I'm like, something's missing.
Huh.
So thank God he was here to let you in.
Yeah.
Well, the door was open at that time. So.
Okay. Strategic planning? Any updates? No.
Nothing.
Policy review, regional agreement, public relations. I do want to talk about kind of developing a way to get information out in terms of, taking over that Facebook page that's on there for the committee and the tweeting account and so forth. So Mike and I'll kind of talk about that and bring it back next week and kind of let you know where we're at with that.
If we talk about strategic planning, are we ready to move forward with that draft, to just get that draft approved by the committee?
We just have to get it on the agenda. That's what we talked about last time, but I think the superintendent search has taken kind of a front seat to that. So whenever is at the convenience of the committee, I think we need to have that discussion.
It's very
and then,
general, and I don't think, but.
well, they've already seen it. It's just the next phase of that we've talked about with Dr. Davis and the administrators
Right.
is getting out to them on how do they implement.
But does the committee, do you need another copy of that so we can get it on the agenda to review
Why don't I put it
again?
on the agenda for the 27th?
Yes,
Yeah.
and do you guys need another copy of
We'll
that?
send it out
Good,
again?
yeah, if you
Yeah,
can send
send
So
it
we
out.
can send another copy out, so
Attach
you have time to review, and that way we can discuss it.
So who's sending it? Because I have
I'll
it.
send it.
Thanks.
Budget, I think at this point, I'm going to talk to the members that have been coming. If we can get another meeting in, we will, but I think it's a time crunch right now between now and the public hearing. Facilities, anything new there?
Yeah, we met last week, seems like longer than that ago. It was another snowy night, I know that, over in Millville with
Oh,
the
yeah.
selectmen.
Mhm.
And all of the members from Millville made it. I think we represented about half of the audience, so that was
At
a
least,
bigger- much
yeah.
bigger audience.
Oh, this
than
is the
we get
capital discussion.
Yeah, it was, and mostly their meeting was focused around their accountant and then their head of FinCom who presented, and then they talked to us about some of the challenges, and I'll ask the other members, but I left there with a sense of we really didn't accomplish a lot of questions that have already been asked kind of got circled around again, a few extra comments here and there. I think the good thing is that Mrs. Dean Wing had recognized the fact that we have not gotten any contributions from the towns above the mandated state funding, and that she understands that that's a challenge for us to be able to take on more than just the general maintenance types of
Custodial,
activities,
yeah.
like fixing the doorknobs.
Mhm.
And I think, my sense also was there was a lot of, I think this is my own opinion, I thought there was a lot more, and I felt at the meeting we had here, a lot more noise around this big list of stuff. And what it keeps coming back to are some really significant issues. It's the floor, the asphalt, repairs to the sidewalks, which I thought we had already taken care of that.
We did a bunch of that.
We had Mr. Levitt did that.
did a bunch of that.
Yeah, did a great
2
job, too,
summers
it looks
ago.
good.
Yeah.
The tanks, both water and the oil tanks. Am I missing anything else, the major stuff they talked
Well,
about?
there was some discussion over basically when does the town end and when does the school begin in terms of the paving? They weren't really sure where that,
I looked into that a little bit, and then when it was brought up, I do remember actually when it was happening. The catch basin had sunk in quite a few years back, and that, it was just done by Millville. That's there, but I don't know if any of you have had a chance to actually focus on the pavement area that they're speaking of, that was identified in this picture.
Was it the lot? I thought it was the lot.
Regardless of,
It's at the, it's the road and where you turn off to the.
Turn to the right, to go
Turn-
around the
you go
circles.
into
When
the
you go
school.
up,
It's not, it's,
it's cracked, right?
it's not even a pothole.
No, it's cracked.
It's just
breaking.
wear and tear.
It's breaking up.
it's 20-some-odd years old, but regardless of where the school ends or begins, it's still this.
It's the town.
Exactly.
Well,
yeah,
Right.
so it was
Just
kind of a,
Just like here at Lincoln Street, like in the complex, those driveways, the town of Blackstone owns those driveways. They're responsible for, if there's any maintenance and so forth. So, it's kind of like,
they do the plowing, they do the sanding, and I guess our custodians do the sidewalks.
and that's the same with the
Standard,
Right.
standard, yeah.
standard.
So for some reason,
whether they just haven't been told, or those haven't been added to a list by Millville, not by us. I don't know.
So was the end result,
Well, the only takeaway I think there is that I felt was, there was another comment that I think came around also again, and I think we need to really have more discussions from, the facility side and with both towns and the district is, that no one has a facilities manager. It's not
Exactly.
like we're gonna go out and hire one. It's not like Blackstone's gonna go out, and Millville's certainly not gonna go out. But we, and Mrs. Dean Wing brought that up again, that's a comment I made is, why don't we look at a shared resource here? There's enough buildings that Millville, Blackstone, and the district operate that even if it's not a full-time position, a part-time position. Mrs. Dean Wing also brought up another opportunity that they were gonna explore. So I think their one takeaway was to look at other communities and what they do for facilities management. And is there a resource that we could tap into, whether like on an interim basis or I think a pay-for-fee type situation. But
There's a woman that's on the FinCom, I can't remember her name now, but she is,
works
she is a facilities manager
works
herself.
She works in a facilities management company.
Yeah, so
I
she
don't think
thought,
she's a facilities manager.
yeah, you're right, but she thought she could maybe come up
She's
with
gonna
some
come up
names.
with some names for some
Yeah.
people, but I think she was looking more from an industry perspective. I think where Mrs. Dean Wing was coming from is maybe there's towns around us who have someone who's not a full-time employee, who might be willing to come out and do some work for us. I think long-term, with the aging of just the schools, and think about the other facilities.
long-term,
we-
it's
we
really,
can have
it's
something.
really a different model and a different vision that everyone has to embrace. Because even having one-person position, that everyone's paying for, there's gonna be some dynamics and logistics there that are gonna be sticky, I think. But I think we have to continue to have the discussion around it, because it's clear that we can't stay, the towns need to hear that we can't stay at a reactive custodial level, because we've been doing that, and we do okay with that. But when these bigger things come up, which they're gonna start coming up more, we need to have a different
We
model.
gotta pull our heads out of the sand here
Mhm.
and start facing some of these things. Now, the one, and this is really, I think, the one issue that keeps pushing this discussion, so in a way, it's a good thing, it's the floor in the kitchen.
Yeah.
And the whole discussion still come around to, does it need to be repaired, does it need to be replaced? We only had one guy quoted, he said it needs to be replaced, and it's gonna cost this much, and he was out of New Jersey, and maybe a crook, I don't know, but anyway,
How's
They-
he
they
feel, how's
wanna-
he feel about Fort Lee? Never mind.
might be for it.
But,
So,
that's,
did-
But
did
that
the-
was left
did the
at,
end
is
result-
Millville was going to get,
I think they were looking at having
They
some more
wanted
bids.
multiple estimates from
Want
all
to get
those
some more bids
projects.
out there
Yeah.
to repair it, to replace it. Where
I
do we really
think-
stand? And it's, I think the original quote was, it's a couple years old now, 2 or 3 years old now.
So I think it's a
I think
year.
it was like
for
27,000.
the entire floor.
It was 25 for the entire floor, 15 for
And whether
the
that was
repair.
what the contractor had recommended or was interpreted, I think something else that I wanted to point out the other night, and it just never got to a point where we were actually speaking, is just keeping up the integrity of that building. I mean, do I think we could replace the floor for a lot less? Hopefully, but someone else had said it, if you patch it now, you're still gonna be talking about it in 5 or 10 years.
That's right.
So
when
Millville
you
has
look- you
has
look at
made
that
great
floor,
pride
though,
in
I
that
think-
building.
Yeah, I think patching is not really an option if you really
No.
look at it's almost like it's spider webbed,
But we
it's-
need, because we've had, I, in my opinion, you have yours,
Yeah.
Dr. Davis had his, they want some professionals to go out and look at it and
Oh,
tell us,
absolutely.
And
what do we
I
need
hope
to
we
do?
could-
What is the opportunity here? Is it a repair job? Is it a replacement? If it's a replacement, maybe we say, okay, well, what's it to replace it with a totally different type of approach?
Mhm.
Instead of using whatever that coating is that they use.
Epoxy.
Different
We're back to the kitchen floor, by the way. So, everything but the kitchen sink. But I think it was a positive discussion from the fact that they asked us to participate. They have obvious concerns. They haven't just forgotten about them. They are definitely, front and center for them.
So were they looping it into something to put on their town meeting, their capital costs?
They're looking to develop the whole capital plan, and there's a number of other things
Yeah.
that came up around that, but that's part of it.
Okay.
That's kind of where it
Mhm.
came from, I think, was let's get people from the district in to talk about that, so.
But they did, across the whole town, had a lot of capital projects.
Yeah,
And they basically said, you know, yeah, we'll put you in line, but they're not gonna pull out us separate. We're gonna be just one of many capital projects.
Right, no,
and
I
that's
get that, I get
So-
that. But it's also the jewel of Millville.
It is.
Did you have one other thing, Perry?
I just wanted to say one other thing to the committee. The JFK AFM roof, when it was redone, the snow load on that building has increased to 35 inches of snow. If some of you have noticed, we did buy snow rakes, so the custodians are kind of coaxing some of the snow off the roof, because the material on the roof is designed to let it slide. In the front of the building, when we get this much snow, it can actually block the sidewalks. So Mr. Sheehan's been out there with some of the other custodians, snow raking it down. And the protocol will be that we'll bring down the tractor with a front-end loader to scoop it and move it away. But it is not an issue of what people have dealt with in the past, where seeing snow on the roof is a concern. The architect is reassured, us again, that the structural engineer says it's 35 inches of snow, so having 11 or 12 up there is not a problem. But we are coaxing it off because of the overhang.
It looks like there's several areas that have, but naturally just
And-
put this on out.
Yeah.
But I
Right.
did notice that by the gymnasium
Yeah.
roof, it seemed like to be like just a natural,
Right.
I don't know if that was a drift.
There's an offload off the roof of the gym, and then down to the lower roof, and then ultimately it will slide off into a courtyard, all right, to do that. But it's not creating any kind of a structural problem. That was fully addressed in the re-roofing project. The one element that has not been completed is there's a safety system, if a custodian needed to go up on the roof to kind of push the snow. It hasn't been installed yet, so I've had to order, nobody goes on the roof, because that is a very slippery slope, forgive the pun at this time of the night. But, no, so they're raking it, that's simply to get some of that low-lying snow, so it doesn't come down on the sidewalk and block the sidewalks. And
Is that in the scope, is it in the punch list right now, the
we have a
final
meeting
pricing?
tomorrow and to go over, yes. The problem is that the particular safety harness comes from a company in Switzerland, and it's been on back order.
It's probably using them all in Sochi.
So,
That's just gonna say, they're all at the Olympics, that's why. I didn't know
but we have a
that-
meeting
that was
tomorrow
on-
morning. But I just want to assure the committee and the public that if they see snow up there, that's not a safety issue, because the structural issue is addressed. The fact that the custodians are using snow rakes, they're simply coaxing some of that low snow off so it doesn't come down on those walkways, particularly in the front of the building. And then the high school piece of equipment will come down and they'll scoop it and move it at this point.
Any leaks, Mr. Superintendent? No.
No,
It's been frozen.
no.
No hits, no runs, no
I
leaks,
just have one
that's
quick
all.
question that I noticed as I'm driving by. All the snow that is falling, and it piles up pretty high near the
Yep.
windows, is there any vents or anything to be concerned about with the piling up of the snow that close to the window? or-
Actually, when you get closer to the building.
It's not as close as it looks.
It's, the way the overhang works, there's usually another foot
Okay.
before you go into the building.
Because it
But-
gets pretty high. I noticed
Yeah.
there's no snow on the roof,
Right.
but then you look down and you
Yeah.
just see a huge
next to the
Right,
pile.
building.
and that's why we're sending the tractor with a front-end loader down, just pick it and scoop. It's just, I have not seen this much snow in a long time.
Yeah.
As I was up at 4 o'clock this morning, dealing with no scope,
Making it recording.
What are we thinking for
waking
tomorrow?
other people up and telling them what I was doing.
What's the prediction?
Probably fine. Tomorrow.
No problem.
Steve, we're gonna move along, no public forum, seeing there's no public here, committee forum.
Just remind my friends in Millville, the special town meeting is February 24th. They're going to meet about the roof project, and we need everyone to show up. That's all.
Bring your roof rigs.
Absolutely.
Just hats off to the staff that's probably working a little extra today, and tonight to open the place up and clean up, and I know it's a tough job, and it's been a kind of a tough stretch here with the snow, but glad to hear the report on the roof. That's about it.
Will you come back to me?
Sure.
Dan?
Yep. Diane?
Was looking forward to hearing about how the empty bowl dinner went, so, but we don't have them, so we'll have to make sure we ask next time we see the students, but hopefully they had a successful night.
Just want to wish everybody a happy vacation, and just to be careful on the roads, especially the high schoolers and the staff. Tomorrow, it's going to be icy, so just drive extra slow and be extra cautious.
All right. Want me to go then? Okay. So I want to have kudos go out to the middle school here, where they did sixth grade did a wax museum project. There was a video of it up on Facebook where all the kids came in, and it was a great community builder in terms of students had to interview a family member and talk about the history. And Joe Raposa was one of the guys on, and it was a great, wonderful, connecting, really great community builder. So I want to say kudos to the sixth grade English ELA teachers and Mr. Cameron, and obviously Janice Fort. So, okay.
Okay, I have two quick things. One quick thing, and then one that's going to take a little bit more time and thought for my colleagues. And this is a mandatory exercise, by the way. First thought, I took a trip up to the district auditions with the middle school band. I was the only parent chaperone, so I had my earbuds in the whole time. But I just want to congratulate 2 out of 3 of the kids who went up there made the orchestra. So they did a fantastic job. And just to tell the kids who didn't, keep practicing. Even Peyton Manning has a bad game now and then. So, so the other thing, and you know, I know the kids couldn't make it tonight. So I was asked by one of our staff teachers. I'm not going to say which one. Just
I have a hunch. It might
We
be.
have a hunch that we know who it is.
anonymous to do a robot coloring contest. So, and Jesse, are you in there still? Could you maybe take a close-up of this for me? Got a number of robots that have been colored, and I'd like to have the committee all vote.
And what is this for?
Here's where I go off subject. It's for the kids. That's what it's for.
This is
But I'm going to
what
go
kids from the school
off my assignment a little bit here, because I decided to, and again, Jess, if you can see that. I thought that the best way to approach this, since it is the Olympic season, is to go for gold, silver, and bronze. So I've got one for each of you. G is for gold, S is for silver, and B is for bronze. Choose the number. Now, the best thing about this is, if you are a parent who might have a student who's represented here, or 2, you can vote for both of them, and you don't have to say how many. Anybody I'm thinking about in particular? So anyway, you guys could vote before you leave, and then you could go. I can tally the results tonight, and
We have to wait till next week for the results? The Olympians get their medals right away.
tomorrow. The kids will know
Sing the
tomorrow.
anthem and everything would be great.
Well, you're not going to know, because these are just numbers. You don't know what numbers what. I don't even know what numbers what, and I have an inside track on this, so that's it.
Okay, awesome.
That's it.
Great.
So.
Anything else? Upcoming meetings, we have our regular meeting in 2 weeks, and we're going to meet next week without you, Dr. Burns. And are we going to meet in Millville on, when did we say we're going to meet in Millville?
I'll take our, rotate our
Yeah.
building sites, or?
Can we shoot for 2 weeks, or do you want to have it here in 2 weeks and then
27th?
look at March?
Well, March, you're gonna have.
March, we're gonna be
you're
at the
gonna
high
have
school.
So it'll be the 27th?
That's 2
Oh,
weeks.
you're on.
Or we
How
could
is
do-
how is the superintendent interviews and that process gonna take
We,
place?
well, we have to discuss that, and I think, so we'll know next week, and
Yeah.
we'll decide together exactly how you want to run it. There's
You
a
said there are a
variety
few
of models.
options.
Because I'm thinking that the 27th would be the last meeting of this committee, because basically the following week's are elections in both towns.
No, that's
That's
April.
April. It's March,
Yeah,
April.
but I mean March 27th. So, I mean, do we hold off and go on the circuit in April?
We could do that too, long as we're committed
You
to it.
know, it doesn't matter to me, but I mean, I'm just saying that you may have some extra meetings thrown in there budget-wise, as well as we're probably gonna have to visit the FinCom.
To be honest, I need to talk to Jesse to see logistically,
Right.
get you on
Right.
camera.
Yeah.
Okay, all right, so you do that, work out the logistics, and then we'll talk about the next two meetings. Okay. Okay, looking for a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Motion made, seconded, we are adjourned.